My family's really into democracy, like really into democracy. My mom's a social studies teacher, and every year she dresses up for Halloween. One year she dressed up as Paul Revere. She ran around the house with a horse in between her legs saying, "The British are coming, the British are coming." The next year, she dressed up like the Declaration of Independence. My brother loved democracy so much that he got his master's degree in the UK and then ended up working for a member of parliament. Every 4th of July, our family reads the Declaration of Independence together. So when I turned 18, the first thing I did was go register to vote. I was super excited. And I remember my first election. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with my parents. I remember walking through the ballot with them. I remember this sense of pride and joy I had when I filled out the little bubble. When I wrote my name on the back of the envelope, I had this great sense of joy. I felt so American in that moment. And election night, it was a lot different. I felt like somebody had taken a knife and stabbed me repeatedly. It wasn't because of the outcome of the presidential election. It wasn't because of John Kerry or George Bush, but it was because Oregon voters decided to put discriminatory language in our state constitution, defining marriage between a man and a woman. I was devastated. I must have ugly cried that night for 8 hours. Like the ugly cry where your mascara is down and it just looks tragic. I was so upset. I grew up in this family that loved democracy, and I felt like it didn't work. I went to school the next day and I was talking to my friends. We were seniors in high school, and they said how upset they were, how frustrated they felt. They'd missed the voter registration deadline. And it wasn't because they didn't care about democracy. It was because they were prepping for their SAT scores or applying to college. They just forgot. They didn't grow up in a family that really thrived and loved democracy. So for the next 2 months, I was pretty upset. I was pretty depressed. I didn't know what to do. And I went to this vegan spaghetti feed with my sister, because it's Portland. And there was this young kid there, and he said, "Hey, do you want to fix democracy? Do you want to get on the bus?" And I was like, what are you talking about? He said, "You want to register to vote today?" I was like, "I'm already registered, but I want to fix democracy." So I should just stop right here and say that the Oregon Bus Project is a group of young people trying to fix democracy for our generation. They try to make it fun, they try to make it innovative, and it's pretty awesome. It's pretty great. One of the things that they were trying to fight at the time was voter registration. They were trying to help fix it so more young people could access the ballot. And I should just stop right here and say, our country was founded on the basic principles of people not being able to vote. So our founding documents have this discriminatory language designed to prevent people from voting. Only white landowning men could vote at the time. And as more people got added into the process, women, white people who didn't own land, people of color, we see throughout history people trying to take away the right to access the ballot. We see this with the Voting Rights Act. We see this with the Jim Crow laws. We see this across the board of people being prevented from voting. And it was designed that way. In 2016, 16 states are going to have restrictive voter ID laws. Just tonight, there's reports of places like Florida who are casting primary ballots, really important ballots, being denied access to the polls. And this was designed as a way to prevent young people from accessing and being able to share their voice. Places like Texas, North Carolina, South Carolina, New Hampshire are making it so difficult for young people to access the polls. Just a few weeks ago in Texas, young people tried to access the right to vote and were turned away because their student ID card didn't match their voter registration card. In 2008, 6 million people weren't able to vote because they missed voter registration deadlines. That's pretty incredible. So this is when the Bus Project comes back in. A bunch of young people were getting together a couple years before 2008 and said, how do we fix this? How do we fix this problem? And they came up with automatic voter registration, also known as Oregon Motor Voter. The idea was young people go to the DMV, they get a driver's license, they get an ID card, and they would be automatically registered to vote. It's the one thing that we all do. So they went to the Oregon legislature and talked to some pretty and powerful people. They said, hey, we have this idea. We know it's a little wonky, but hear us out. And they said, yeah, let's do it. But first, let's do two important things. The first one was 17-year-old pre-registration, so that people that were in my high school could register to vote. And then when they turned 18, presuming they were living with their families, would then be added to the registration. So the bus project hustled. They hustled hard. They went to the state capitol, they shared stories, and were able to pass it. They were successful. So that was the first step. They went back the next year and said, how can we fix this? And I'll stop right here. You can probably look around. Somebody's probably on a mobile device. It's the one thing that all young people do, right? We're always plugged in. We always have iPads. We have our computers. We're constantly plugged in. Why not be able to register to vote using one of those tablets? That was the idea. They went the next year. They went back to legislature. They shared stories. They told people how great this idea was. And they passed it. The first year alone, they registered 87,000 people. It was revolutionary. A bunch of young people trying to fix democracy. So they went back again with Secretary of State Kate Brown and said, how do we pass this? She said, I'm going to make it a priority. I'm going to make it mine. So she went, we shared stories, we shared testimony, we fought hard. It went to the House, it passed with bipartisan support, it went to the Senate and then failed by one vote. But we went back the next year because nothing happens overnight. We shared stories of Republicans and Democrats and young people and working Oregonians and how this would impact all of us. It would help make democracy more accessible. And we passed it. Governor Kate Brown signed it into law, making it so that every Oregonian could have every Oregonian that was eligible would have access to a ballot. It was great. And just last week, one of my friends sent me a text message and she said, Nikki, you're magic. I was like, what are you talking about? She said, I don't know. I went to the DMV, I changed my address, and then all of a sudden, 4 days later, I got something from the Secretary of State saying I'm registered. It was great. I didn't have to think about it. And I share this story because it's so important. Most people care about democracy. Most people didn't grow up in a household where their mom dresses up like Paul Revere. And these people who move, hardworking Oregonians who move because they get a new job, because of rent increases, or whatever it may be, it's not that they don't care about democracy. They do. And they shouldn't be excluded from the process. This allows all Oregonians to have a ballot in their hands when election time comes. This was monumental when it passed. We had news outlets from all across the world contacting this little bus project about the historic victory. We saw people like the Washington Post, the Guardian, the LA Times talking about this little revolutionary idea that fixed democracy. And we were so excited. And like any good Oregonians, we have a healthy disregard for Californians. We think that their drivers are really aggressive, their basketball teams suck, and every year it seems like the Stanley Cup goes to the LA Kings. But we'll give credit where credit's due. Congratulations, California, on being the second state to pass automatic voter registration. Just last month, the President of the United States went to his hometown of Illinois and talked about automatic voter registration. The President of the United States was talking about this little idea that the bus project came up with. We were ecstatic. We want this to catch off like wildfire, and it is. In places like Vermont, Alaska, are talking about fixing democracy. And in a wave of voter suppression techniques, we are celebrating this. We want everybody to have access to the polls. Just last week, Secretary of State Jean Atkins announced some pretty big news. So I'll just stop right here and say that I'm a little bit wonky and I really like democracy numbers. So on average, the state of Oregon registers about 2,000 people a month. Under Oregon Motor Voter, in less than 1 month, 24 business days, we registered 15,502 people. That's 7.5 more than we normally do. So all of these people have access to voting. It's historic, it's monumental, and we should celebrate it. I just like to share a quick story about young people growing up in Oregon. They live under a system that celebrates the fact that they have access to the polls. They want them to vote. They're never going to have to know what it's like to stand in line in Florida for 12 hours in the sun during a hurricane. They're never going to know what it's like to live in a place like Texas and be turned away because they don't have access to the ballot because of their ID. They're never going to know that. They live in a state that has vote by mail, that has pre-registration for 17-year-olds. You can register to vote online. And it's so historic. I'm going to leave you tonight with one thing. We have a really great opportunity to continue the conversation. And for folks that are online, we encourage you to follow the hashtag #ORMotorVoter or #NewMotorVoter. This is a way to get involved and continue the conversation. Continue the conversation to support democracy. We're really excited and we're really proud. Governor Kate Brown, on her first election, won by 7 votes. If those 7 people had decided to stay home and not get involved, we wouldn't be here tonight celebrating Oregon Motor Voter. Thank you.